I have trained and taught you all from when I first started up to the present day. But now I am old, and before long I shall die. I reckon that I have taught you everything, both in external things as well as internal, and there is nothing left over with which to make up any more remedies. Any of you who still feel unsatisfied will have to make it up for yourselves. But take care not to alter it and turn it into poison that destroys yourself as well as your companions, as we have seen and heard just now. Apart from this, you may go ahead as you will, and with my blessing also." When Venerable Ajaan finished this talk, which came like a thunderbolt, none of the bhikkhus who were there dared to move or fidget about at all, for they were all rigidly holding themselves still and silent. When he saw how afraid and pitiful they looked, he started to talk Dhamma in a soothing, gentle manner, speaking quite softly, as if it was coming from a completely different person, saying, "What I have just said was for the purpose of overcoming a powerful and virulent disease, which otherwise would spread throughout those who practice the way, much in the same way as an epidemic spreads out and about everywhere on the physical plane. If this happened, good people would not be able to live in such conditions, for it would be like a fire going round the whole world, burning everything. Of course I have sympathy for those whose intention in coming here is interest and desire for Dhamma, but when Dhamma is revealed to the relative, conventional world, there is no soundproof room available, and no way to divide out what ought to be heard by this person and what by that person. So what is taught is bound to be heard by all who are there, regardless of who is guilty, who is innocent, who is good and who is evil, in any aspect of the teaching. But you should check for yourself while listening to see whether you are free from fault or going in the wrong way, or whether you are free of fault and well established in each aspect of the teaching. In this way it is a means of indicating where one is right and where wrong, for the Dhamma which one hears is a bright light showing up and enabling one to see the wrong path and the right path in the way of practice, both in the present and for the future, quite clearly. This is in conformity with one's intention in coming here, to train and learn so as to attain knowledge and skill for oneself. Because amongst those who are truly interested in Dhamma, there are many who still do not understand the methods of practice. If they do not hear and learn something about them to act as a guide, they are quite likely to see someone else doing wrong, faulty things, and then follow their example without thinking, checking, or investigating these things. This way can lead to loss and ruin, even though they have no intention of doing anything wrong. This is especially true if they chance to meet any of those big sharks which I described a short while ago, for they will easily be swallowed up, which is most unfortunate and springs from their lack of training and their inability to see through these charlatans. From then on, he continued speaking in a normal way, as if nothing unusual had taken place. This gave all the bhikkhus a break so that they could get their breath back, for his manner was completely different from what it had been when they were as if in a confined closed pot, doing penance to change their wrong views, unable to breathe properly while being scorched by the cathartic Dhamma, the Tapa Dhamma. When the talk came to an end, one by one they saluted Venerable Ajaan and left his hut. Some of them were relaxed and smiling, like prisoners who have just been released, and they gathered in groups to have their usual discussion. But some of the bhikkhus appeared to be rather angry, and one of them blurted out saying, "Why did you have to go and talk about that? Couldn't you have chosen something more reasonable and suitable to talk about? You see what happened and how it turned out. I should think that there were some who almost fainted when they were knocked about like that. Before you do that sort of thing, why don't you ask someone who knows Venerable Ajaan's character well? Then when you have something good and reasonable to ask him, go ahead. If this sort of thing happens again, that you bring up something to tell Venerable Ajaan as bad as you told him today, then I won't come to these talks. I'll leave it up to those who are good and clever to receive such a beating on their own." The one who told Venerable Ajaan said, "Actually, I never thought that he would take it so strongly as he did, so I told him without thinking anything of it. He then went on to say quite reasonably, "Whoever thinks that he has been scolded unreasonably has not seen his own faults." Isn't that so? But for myself, I wanted him to be even stronger and more heavy-handed. Today my chitta gave way and went so calm, almost like I was dead. For Venerable Ajaan's talk just suited the disposition of my chitta, which is so playful and has been going all over the world today. If I try doing the meditation practice on my own, my chitta is so stubborn it jumps all over the place and won't give way and calm down at all, like a herd of monkeys in a cage. But today, as soon as I was hit by Venerable Ajaan's strong Dhamma penetrating into it, my chitta had no way of escape, so it gave way and calmed down quite easily. Another bhikkhu said with evident satisfaction, "Oh, it was really good today. I would like to offer my thanks to you for having the courage to tell him such a thing. After this, I wonder if anyone will be able to bring up anything so unusual, controversial, and inflammatory to tell him, so that my monkey chitta will be able to get a bit of calm and happiness while he beats it and scolds it so strongly. Since I came and first heard Venerable Ajaan's talks, I have never heard any which was so important and significant for me as the one today." Another of the bhikkhus then also spoke with satisfaction about this talk. That day many bhikkhus were present who heard Venerable Ajaan speak. Some were in his hut, but there were others at the side and underneath his hut who had heard the noise and came to see what it was about. They variously had different reactions to what he said. Many were so afraid of him that they almost forgot to breathe. But there were also many who liked to listen to strong and forceful talks. For when they hear this kind of talk, their chittas become very calm and unshakable at such a time. A number of bhikkhus, most of whom had recently come to the Wat to stay with Venerable Ajaan, felt both afraid and ashamed, and wanted to crawl into a hole in the ground. Their chittas were hot and burning, and they found no joy at all while listening, even though they found nothing to blame in themselves in the Dhamma that he was teaching. In particular, my own feelings were turbulent and rather mad, all within my own heart. But the thing which went right home and stuck fast in my heart right up to the present day was when he said, "Are you learning and practicing in the manner of dogs, or in what manner?" Really, this was just because I didn't want to be a dog, even though I had virtually become one already due to my lack of circumspect wisdom. But I didn't realize that I had already become a fully fledged dog from the first moment when Venerable Ajaan talked about dogs gnawing and eating bones, while priding myself with the thought in my heart that I didn't come to practice so as to become a dog, but to become a complete, fully fledged bhikkhu, and I didn't come to practice so as to get hold of his bones at all, but for Dhamma, which means the path, fruition, and nibbana. From that day when I became a dog, secretly, nobody else knew, I didn't even know myself, but from the moment when I heard what Venerable Ajaan said, it became firmly fixed in my heart that I didn't come to stay and practice with him in the manner of a dog. I must apologize to the reader for disclosing my gross stupidity, for it seems to me that there was not much virtue left in me, so I want to let it be known how stupid I was. But I ask you please to go on reading with sympathy, because what I have related is the truth. After this, when Venerable Ajaan died and his remains were cremated, and the time came to share out his bone relics and requisites, so that his followers could use them as reminders and as objects of reverence and puja, I quickly ran off into the forests and hills where nobody knew where I was, thinking how clever I was. How if I had stayed there until they shared out the remains, I would have to accept my share of his requisites and bone relics. Then I could not be free from being a dog, like he said. So finally the dog, who was far too clever, went off to the hills and forests, not wanting to wait and accept his share of the remains of Venerable Ajaan at all. This is an example of how stupid one can become, while at the same time thinking how clever one is. It had gone so far that I was virtually a dog because of that way of thinking, while also understanding that I was a bhikkhu with a peaceful heart, and afraid that I would become a dog. It really is a pitiful, sorry thing that I should interpret those words of Venerable Ajaan's Dhamma talk in this way, causing me to become a complete dog, without any thought or reflection at all, for I was still afraid that I could become a dog while having the conceit that I was not one. About a year after Venerable Ajaan died, I began to recognize my foolishness, and how I had so cleverly and completely misunderstood what he said that it was more than one could expect him to pardon. What led me to see how foolish I had been before it was too late, so that the guardian of hell had to take my name off his list, which was like breaking up hell, was thinking back and recalling the virtues of Venerable Ajaan on various occasions, and doing so all the time regardless of whatever else I was doing. This went on until it suddenly struck me with a jolt. Oh-ho! Buddhists who pay homage to the Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha do so to a Buddha image, to the requisites and the places of significance in the life of the Lord. They also pay homage to the Dhamma which is printed in books and written on palm leaf manuscripts and elsewhere, and they pay homage to the Sangha, who are the representatives of the Lord, and uphold his name and his ways of practice right through to the elimination of the kilesas. The homage and respect which they pay the Lord is most appropriate and excellent, and the form of their traditions is an ideal example for us Buddhists who follow after them to grasp and uphold as a good, flawless, and blameless example. It is for this reason that I should accept the requisites and bone relics of Venerable Ajaan Mun, and keep them and honor them and pay the highest respect to them, in the same way that all his other followers have done. For they stand in the place of Venerable Ajaan, to whom I gave the greatest respect and love, so that I would have willingly sacrificed everything for him without regret. Why have I been afraid of becoming a dog? Oh-ho! Haven't I already become a dog in the guise of a self-opinionated bhikkhu because of the damage done by my own stupidity from the moment when I heard that talk of Venerable Ajaan's? So I'm smart and clever, but I don't know what it is that makes one become a dog, a bhikkhu, or a human being. Thinking I was so clever has turned me into a dog, except that I don't have a tail as most dogs do. This is really a sorry state that I am in, and there is no way I can ask for forgiveness, for it is too late already. Venerable Ajaan Mun, who had so much metta for me, and who was afraid I would become a dog, has already gone into Parinibbana. For what Venerable Ajaan taught in that talk I refused to accept, and instead I got it all wrong and turned it into the ideas of a dog, and even though he spoke so strongly against this, I still would not listen. What a thing to happen! Anicca vata sankhara. How the sankharas can deceive a bhikkhu, turning him into a dog before his very eyes. Upadavaya tammino. Right now I have been as a dog in the guise of a bhikkhu. Upatitva nirochandi. Having been born as a dog, by what various means and methods will I be able to get rid of the state of being a dog? Quickly, think, search for a way to get rid of this state. Don't waste time or dawdle about as if I was a bhikkhu, when in fact at this moment I am a dog. By stopping and getting rid of all thoughts which led me to become a dog, the dog within me will die away, and my heart will automatically become happy as it disappears. Having fully realized my faulty ways, I paid respects to Venerable Ajaan and asked for pardon with fullness of heart, and then hurried about to ask for some of his bone remains, which they had set aside for the general public to pay homage to for the time being. Once the construction of the Uposatha Hall in Wat Suttawasa in Sagonnakhon province was completed, they were to be placed under the Buddha Rupa. Venerable Prakro Udom Dhammaguna, Ajaan Mahatongsak Suchitto, the abbot of Wat Suttawasa, was very kind and friendly to this foolish bhikkhu, but even after I had been given some of the relics of Venerable Ajaan and felt satisfied with them, they also acted as a reminder, as if the results of the kamma, the vipaka, of that dog were still clinging to me and I couldn't get rid of them. In particular, when I got the bone relics, I was hoping from day to day that they would turn into arahantatu, but at the same time there was something which made me realize all the time that Venerable Ajaan's bone relics would never become dhatu while they were under the influence of that kamma of mine which came from the time when I insulted him with my stupidity. If they no longer remained in my possession, there is no doubt that they could easily become dhatu. It was most strange and wonderful how, when they were shared out to other people to pay respect to with puja, his bone relics very soon turned into Tātu. This is so different from what happens when they are possession of one who is infected with the great evil of a lot of self-destroying wisdom so that he had no faith. But this is what happened to me, and this Kamma has still not gone, nor does it disperse easily. Even those relics of Venerable Ajaan which I was keeping have gone gradually, despite my full-hearted respect and devotion for him. Until now I have reverted to my former state. In other words, by myself, empty-handed, as if this were the same old dog, which in truth suits my level and status. Nowadays, when I try to find any bone relics or Tātu of Venerable Ajaan, it is quite hopeless, and I have no way to get any of them to pay respect and reverence to. In the end, this has enabled me to live free from concern, like someone who lives contentedly without hope, even though my heart is still restlessly wanting to get some relics. So I keep reminding myself, saying, "Now do you believe? This is Kamma which you can see clearly with your own eyes, and you don't have to go and ask anyone else about it." This is how I have been teaching myself to be mindful, by the use of irony, so that in the future, however I may think about all the things we do think about, I shall not do so with conceit and pride in my skills and ability, while seeing only one side of the thing in question without going over it many times and seeing it from all sorts of angles and directions, which is the way that those who are truly clever have always used. Since that time, even though I have seen and fully accepted my fault, there is still some remaining disharmony in my heart in connection with the bone relics of Venerable Ajaan. It is not easy to overcome and get rid of, like ordinary forms of good and evil which are experienced by people. This is what they call mano-kamma, kamma made by mind, and before this happened I thought it gave rise to results in the same way as other forms of kamma which we do in connection with the 5 doors of the senses. It never impressed me as being anything much before this incident, but once it became clear to me how it was between me and the relics of Venerable Ajaan, all doubts that I had in regard to Kamma disappeared entirely concerning the way that Kamma gives rise to results, and what kinds of results also. Anyone who makes Kamma should be able to know this for himself, provided that he does not forget all about it, although he may not care to talk about it to other people. The talk that Venerable Ajaan Mun gave on that day was given with the full intention and metta of rendering the utmost assistance to all of us in a manner which is difficult to explain. He helped us by closing off all those paths which lead to such vile, despicable, and evil ways, for fear that they may overflow and stain and spoil that which is still good and useful. He helped us to close those paths with the utmost vigor and skill, because to take the bone relics of one's teacher and sell them is a most loathsome and despicable thing to do for a Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhu who has been trained well. Once he knows what is good and evil in this, he is not likely to do such a thing. So Venerable Ajaan likened the doing of such a thing to the actions of a dog, because this was a case of biting and gnawing in the manner of animals who know nothing of merit and evil, or the virtue and vice which is the basis of human behavior and ways of practical interrelationships. When we don't do such things as biting and gnawing like dogs, then we cannot become dogs. That's all. But in the special case of one who was not quite all there, and who distorted what was said, twisting it completely into his own characteristic thoughts by being afraid that taking the bone relics of Venerable Ajaan as a basis for paying respect and puja would result in his becoming a dog, it finally turned him into a dog due to his own stupidity. So I implore all of you who read this not to grasp hold of one facet or aspect of your thoughts and understanding about anything, and then go and take this as a guide to your actions. For this will lead you to become someone who is not circumspect, not seeing all sides of a situation, and to have mistakes and faults which may be handed down to many other people. But when one's thoughts and understanding have been tested and thoroughly examined in detail, they will probably be the kind of thoughts which are suitable for putting into action in all things. Such thoughts are not likely to be at fault either in the world or in Dhamma. Even if it only concerns one's own practice for one's own development, one should promote such modes of thought so that one will not make mistakes leading to sorrow in the future. So those who have faith in Buddhism should have circumspection imbued with reason in their practice of the Buddhist teaching. Then whatever they do in the world or in Dhamma will not be wrong or mistaken, going at a direction at variance with their intentions, because the principles of Buddhism are controlled by reason in every part and every sentence throughout the whole of the Dhamma, which is constantly proclaimed and taught in this religion. There are some people who have a belief in Buddhism, and although this is the same Dhamma teaching of the Lord Buddha as it has always been, yet they practice in different ways that look different and are characteristically different, while apparently keeping close to Buddhism as the guarantor of the correctness of what they are doing, until some others can no longer accept it and disagree with them. This is something which should be thought about by those Buddhists who clearly understand the reasoning behind the principles of Dhamma, so that the way they act and do things shall not be erratic, unstable, and unreliable, but in harmony with the principles of the Sasana Dhamma, which is the teaching that is truly derived from the Sasada, the great teacher, both in the causes which it teaches us to perform, and the results that come from them, which do not contradict each other, unlike what is always happening amongst those who are Buddhists. If one thinks and examines carefully about the major tenets and the lesser teachings of Buddhism, even though there may be some disagreements between the different branches of Dhamma and their characteristic manner of doing things, it is probably not so much as to cause great annoyance and disaffection, such as we can see happening now. One can almost say that this, thinking about the principles of the Sasana, is a home remedy in the war of words amongst Buddhists who are like people throwing water at each other at the New Year festival of Songkran, without any thought as to whether the time and place is appropriate, even though both sides are full of the best intentions in regard to the Sasana. From this we can see some of the faults and deficiencies in us Buddhists who go about doing the practice following our own understanding and inclinations, rather than being firmly grounded in the principles of Dhamma, which point out the direction we should go like a compass needle. Ways and manners of eating. In what I have already written, I have mentioned the bowl and the size of bowl which is used by Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhus. The bowl is considered to be a very important requisite, both when living normally and also when going out wandering in secluded places to practice the Samarna Dhamma, the Dhamma of a recluse. Under normal conditions, if a Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhu is going to eat food, he must go for Paṭipadā as part of his daily routine, and these Bhikkhus always eat out of the bowl. When they go out wandering in the Kammaṭṭhāna way, they use the bowl to keep their various possessions in, much in the same way as lay people take along a suitcase when they go traveling. If there are several Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhus staying together in a dwelling or monastery, they will normally eat together after returning from Paṭipadā. In this case, or when there are several Bhikkhus going out wandering together, after returning to the place where they are staying, the normal practice is to take the food out of their bowls and put it all together on trays, after which it is shared out evenly to all of them. After this, if there are any lay people present, the Bhikkhus give thanks, anumodana, by chanting the Atha Sabbe, after which they start eating from the bowl by hand, but generally they tend to give anumodana in the village, after they have received all the Paṭipadā food in a small shelter which the villagers have constructed in a suitable place, or sometimes two places for this purpose. The Bhikkhus sit down here and give the anumodana, after which they return to where they are staying, in which case the villagers do not follow them. They just put all the food of all kinds into their bowls and leave them alone. After the Bhikkhus have arranged the food in their bowls and before they start eating, they make themselves calm. Then they contemplate the food by recollection, pacavekkana, of its purpose, using the Patisankhayoniso verse, which points out the nature of the various different kinds of food which are in one's bowl, by way of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, by way of patikula sanya, loathsomeness, and by way of the dhatu, the elements of existence. Whichever one of these is used will depend on the skill and ability of each individual to use as he is able to. This is done for at least 1 minute, after which they dip their hands into their bowls and start to eat in a controlled and seemly manner while being mindful of the process of eating food. While eating, they do not chatter or talk except when it becomes necessary, in which case they make themselves fully self-conscious before speaking. They say what has to be said, and then stop. Before speaking, they wait until they have had time to swallow any food that they may have in the mouth, and then speak clearly, not mumbling, which would be an ill-mannered way of speaking while eating. While speaking, they fix their attention on speaking until they have finished saying what is necessary. Then they resume eating in a seemly and proper manner as before, with mindfulness watching over the process of chewing and eating the whole time, to make sure they are not making loud and unseemly noises of crunching and munching, which would be bad manners and characteristic of carelessness and greed. They keep their eyes on the bowl, and their thoughts mindfully associated with what is in the bowl, not looking all about the place at other things while eating, which is the way of those who forget themselves and lack mindfulness. While they are eating, they contemplate whatever aspect of Dhamma suits their ability, such as by taking the food as a supporting basis, aramana, or sometimes other forms of Dhamma which they are used to investigating as the supporting basis of their contemplation. But usually they contemplate the food that they are eating, rather than other forms of Dhamma. Eating food in a careful, self-controlled manner with mindfulness present, while contemplating with wisdom, will probably give rise to some unusual experiences quite often while eating. Sometimes a feeling of weariness and disaffection with eating can arise so that one has got to stop eating for a short while, or stop entirely. This is because the taste of Dhamma which arises at that time is so greatly superior to the dull fascination that one has in the food one is eating. The process of picking up the food and putting it in one's mouth should be done with mindfulness present the whole time, just the same as in any other forms of practice, for eating food is one of the primary routines in the bhikkhu's life, and not inferior to any of the others as a means of steadily getting rid of the kilesas within them. If they are not careful, and they become so fascinated by the taste of the food that they forget themselves, their eating turns into the way of the world, and it cannot then be considered as one of the regular routines of a bhikkhu who aspires to see where danger lies in everything which is within his ability to experience in his total environment and in all situations. Therefore, all the true acharyas, such as Venerable Ajaan, have always looked upon the process of eating food as being a most important routine. When they eat food, the bhikkhus all eat together, and however many of them there may be, it seems to each one as if he is alone with no other bhikkhus present, because they do not talk together, and each one of them is concerned only with his own practice, self-controlled and peaceful. This comes from their belief that eating food is a routine in which they should take some interest, for it is an aspect of Dhamma in the same way as all the other routines that they follow.